Every crime is a wound on the world. We're here to dissect it, layer by layer, to find the truth buried within. This is Anatomy of Crime. The night air in Antwerp is still and cold, heavy with the weight of old money and unspoken secrets. Here, in a single square mile of cobblestone streets and fortified buildings, nearly 80% of the world's rough diamonds pass through human hands. This is the Antwerp Diamond Quarter, a place built on trust but secured by paranoia. And at its very heart, a fortress within a fortress, stands the Antwerp World Diamond Center. It is a monument to security, a gray, unassuming building that holds within its belly a vault believed to be utterly, unequivocally, impregnable. Imagine a vault buried 2 floors beneath the earth, a vault protected not by 1 or 2 safeguards, but by 10 distinct layers of security, each one a technological marvel of its time. The door alone is a masterpiece of deterrence, nearly a foot thick, forged from steel and copper, weighing 3 tons. It is secured by a combination lock with 100 million possible permutations. To even approach this door, you must first pass through a locked grate, monitored by 24-hour armed guards and a web of surveillance cameras. The vault itself is a box of solid, reinforced concrete. Its contents are protected by a symphony of silent guardians: Doppler radar, infrared heat detectors, seismic sensors that can feel the faintest vibration, and a magnetic field so sensitive that the door will remain sealed if it detects an unauthorized object nearby. If an intruder were somehow to get the door open and trip this magnetic field, steel plates would slam down, sealing them inside. For decades, the message of the Antwerp Diamond Center was clear. What is inside this vault will stay inside this vault. It was not a challenge, it was a statement of fact. And then came the morning of Monday, February 17, 2003. Bank officials and diamond merchants began their week, descending into the quiet, climate-controlled sanctum below the city. They passed through security, approached the massive steel door, and prepared to enter the vault. But something was wrong. The vault door, which should have been sealed shut, was slightly ajar. There was no sign of forced entry, no blaring alarms, no frantic calls from the security company. Just a profound, unsettling silence. Inside, the scene was one of surreal, meticulous violation. 123 of the 189 safe deposit boxes had been opened. They were not blown apart or crudely pried open. They were simply empty. Glittering dust, the phantom memory of untold riches, was all that remained. Diamonds, gold, jewelry, cash, and securities, an amount later estimated to be worth well over $100 million, had vanished. The thieves had floated through the world's most advanced security system like ghosts, taking what they wanted and leaving behind nothing but a gaping, impossible mystery. The police were baffled. The insurance companies were horrified. The world was captivated. It was, by all accounts, the perfect crime. Today, on Anatomy of Crime, we dissect the anatomy of that perfect crime. We will explore the years of obsessive planning, the ingenious, almost deceptively simple methods used to defeat a technological fortress, and the team of artists, because that's what they considered themselves, who pulled it off. But we will also dissect the single, microscopic flaw in their masterpiece, the one moment of human fallibility that proved perfection is an illusion, and that even the most elaborate plans can be undone by the simple carelessness of a discarded sandwich. To understand the audacity of the heist, we must first understand the man who dreamed it into existence. His name is Leonardo Notarbartolo. He was not a brutish thug or a desperate criminal. He was a craftsman, a specialist, a man who saw theft not as a sin, but as a complex art form. Born in 1952 in Palermo, Sicily, he grew up in Turin, a city in northern Italy known for its industrial grit and Baroque elegance. From a young age, he was drawn to the intricate dance of locks, keys, and security systems. He became a student of vulnerability, learning how things were built so he could understand how they could be unbuilt. By the time he was in his late 40s, Notarbartolo was a master of his trade. He was charming, intelligent, and impeccably dressed. He presented himself as a legitimate jeweler, a cover that was more than just a cover. It was a genuine aspect of his life. He understood gems, he spoke the language of the industry, and he could move comfortably in the opulent world he intended to plunder. He was a professional, running a small, tight-knit crew of specialists who he called the School of Turin. They were not a gang. They were a surgical team. They specialized in high-stakes, low-violence jewelry thefts, targeting stores and private residences with a quiet efficiency that rarely made headlines. In the year 2000, Notarbartolo set his sights on the ultimate prize, the Antwerp World Diamond Center. This was not a sudden impulse. It was the culmination of a lifetime's ambition. To conquer the Antwerp vault would be to solve the world's most complex puzzle box. It was the Everest of thievery. And so, he began the most patient and meticulous phase of his plan. He became a part of the very community he was targeting. He rented a small office inside the Diamond Center itself on the 3rd floor. He registered a fake import-export diamond business called Selgin, paying his rent on time, every time. For over 2 years he played the part of a modest but legitimate Italian diamond merchant. He would fly in from Turin, conduct small, unremarkable business deals, greet the guards by name, and chat with his fellow tenants. He was friendly, unassuming, and completely invisible. He was building trust, the one key that can't be forged. While his public persona was that of a mild-mannered businessman, his private work was one of obsessive reconnaissance. He was a spy in the enemy's camp. His most ingenious tool was a simple pen, hollowed out to contain a tiny digital camera. During his visits, he would discreetly photograph everything. He captured images of the building's layout, the security cameras, the hallways, and most importantly, the vault area in the basement. He documented the guards' routines, the timing of their patrols, and the electronic keypads. Day after day, month after month, he gathered intelligence. He learned that the vault's combination was rarely changed. He noted the model of the security cameras. He discovered that the master key for the vault, a monstrously complex and supposedly unduplicatable object, was kept in a small, unsecured utility closet just outside the vault antechamber. It was a stunning lapse in an otherwise ironclad system. The building's security was designed to stop a frontal assault, but it was vulnerable to a slow, patient infiltration from within. Notarbartolo wasn't planning to break in. He was planning to simply walk in. His 2-year performance as a tenant was the first and most critical step in bypassing the 10 layers of security. He had made the fortress his home. A heist of this magnitude could not be accomplished alone. Leonardo Notarbartolo might have been the architect, but he needed a team of master craftsmen to build his vision. He assembled a small group of specialists from his trusted school of Turin, each chosen for a unique and indispensable skill. These were not hired guns. They were artists in their own right, the best in their respective fields. To protect their identities, they operated using aliases, nicknames that spoke to their legendary abilities. First, there was the man Notarbartolo called the Genius. He was a longtime friend and an electronics wizard, a man who could look at an alarm system, not as a barrier, but as a conversation. He understood the language of wires, sensors, and magnetic fields. His role was to deconstruct the vault's technological nervous system and find a way to neutralize it without causing a system-wide panic. He was the one who would have to blind the heat sensors, fool the motion detectors, and tame the powerful magnetic field protecting the vault door. He was the ghost in the machine. Next was the man they called the King of Keys. His true identity remains a mystery to this day, an almost mythical figure in the criminal underworld. He was said to be one of the finest lockpicks and key duplicators in the world. His primary challenge was the vault key itself. It was a long, double-sided key with a unique dimpled pattern, designed to be impossible to replicate from a mere photograph. But Notarbartolo had managed to get his hands on it, for just a few precious moments, while the guards were distracted. His task was to create a perfect copy, a skeleton key to a kingdom of riches. The success of the entire operation rested on the precision of his hands. Then there was the man known as the Monster. His real name was Ferdinando Fonotto, a giant of a man whose size belied his incredible dexterity and technical skill. The Monster was the team's utility player, the master of all trades. He could handle heavy equipment, bypass physical obstacles, and, crucially, he was an expert at disabling complex alarm systems. He was the muscle, but he was also a technician. When brute force was needed, he could provide it, but his true value lay in his ability to apply that strength with surgical precision. Finally, there was the driver and logistics man, Pietro Talvano, nicknamed Speedy. He was Notarbartolo's childhood friend, a nervous, perpetually anxious individual whose main job was to handle the getaway and, critically, to dispose of the evidence after the job was done. He was not a master thief like the others. He was the support staff, the one responsible for the cleanup. It was a role that seemed minor in the grand scheme of the heist, but as events would later prove, the strength of a chain is determined by its weakest link. With the team assembled, the planning entered its most critical phase. Using the photographs and intelligence Notarbartolo had gathered, they built a life-size replica of the Antwerp vault in a warehouse outside Milan. For months, they trained. They practiced every step of the operation over and over again, until it became muscle memory. They timed their movements to the second, working in silence, communicating with hand signals. They simulated every possible contingency, troubleshooting every potential failure. The genius devised ingenious, low-tech solutions to high-tech problems. The vault's passive infrared heat sensor, designed to detect the body heat of an intruder, was a major obstacle. Tripping it would trigger an immediate alarm. His solution was breathtakingly simple. He would use a can of women's hairspray to coat the sensor, creating a thin, opaque film that would temporarily blind it. For another heat detector, inside, he fashioned a shield out of a simple block of styrofoam, which would insulate their body heat from the sensor's view. The magnetic field, protecting the vault door, was another formidable challenge. It was designed to trigger an alarm and drop a steel barrier if the door was opened while the field was active. The genius constructed a custom-made shield out of aluminum, a non-ferrous metal. The plan was for the monster to hold this shield over the magnetic plates at the precise moment the door was opened, effectively making them invisible to the system. Even the combination lock, with its 100 million possibilities, was not beyond their grasp. Notarbartolo had discovered through his surveillance that the combination was hidden behind a flimsy metal panel in the utility closet near the vault. But even if they couldn't find it, they had a backup plan. They painstakingly developed a custom-made tool that could be inserted into the lock mechanism to physically manipulate the tumblers, feeling them fall into place one by one. It was a process that would take hours of painstaking, silent work. And finally, there was the key. The King of Keys had succeeded in creating a perfect duplicate from the brief glimpse Notarbartolo had afforded him. It was a work of art, a testament to his legendary skill. With the key, the tools and a plan rehearsed to perfection, the school of Turin was ready. They had spent over 2 years preparing for a single night of work. They weren't just planning a robbery, they were orchestrating a symphony. The weekend of February 15, 2003, was chosen with deliberate care. It was the weekend of the annual Diamond Ball, a major social event in Antwerp that would ensure many of the city's jewelers and security personnel were distracted. The city would be celebrating, its guard lowered just enough. The weather was cold and dreary, the kind of night that encourages people to stay indoors. The stage was perfectly set. On Saturday evening, the team moved into position. Notarbartolo, the genius, and the monster entered the Diamond Center using Notarbartolo's legitimate tenant key card. They carried a large bag filled with their custom tools, which looked like ordinary work equipment. Speedy waited outside in the getaway vehicle, a rented Peugeot. The King of Keys, his primary task of creating the key already complete, was not present for the breach itself. Once inside the quiet, mostly empty building, they made their way to the second floor, to a small, unused storage room directly above the vault. Here they waited. They knew the building's motion sensors were deactivated on weekends to allow tenants access to their offices. However, they were still on camera. Their first move was to disable the surveillance system. The genius accessed the security room and carefully inserted a fake videotape into the recorder connected to the vault-level cameras. The tape showed a simple, looped recording of an empty hallway. To the guards watching the monitors, everything would appear normal. They had effectively made themselves invisible. Next, they descended to the basement. Their first physical obstacle was the locked grate leading to the vault antechamber. This was a simple matter for a team of their caliber. They quickly and quietly picked the lock. They were now standing before the heart of the fortress. The air was cool, the silence absolute. They began to dismantle the 10 layers of security, one by one, with the calm precision of surgeons. First, the infrared sensor in the antechamber. As planned, the monster carefully sprayed a fine mist of hairspray over the lens, blinding it. They proceeded to the small utility closet where Notarbartolo knew the vault key was kept. They found it, confirming that the King of Keys' duplicate was no longer even necessary. They had the original. This was a significant bonus, eliminating one of the biggest risks of the operation. Now they faced the Threaten vault door. The combination lock was next. They opened the small metal panel nearby and found, to their astonishment, the piece of paper with the combination written on it. The vault managers, in a breathtaking display of complacency, had left the code just feet from the lock it operated. But the team stuck to their plan, assuming it could be a trap. They used their custom tool, spending hours carefully manipulating the tumblers, until they heard the soft, satisfying clicks of the mechanism aligning. With the combination entered, the most delicate part of the operation began. They had to open the massive door without tripping the magnetic alarm. The monster held the custom-made aluminum shield over the 2 magnetic plates on the door and the doorframe. Notarbartolo turned the wheel, and the massive door swung open with a whisper. The shield had worked perfectly. The magnetic field was blind to their entry. They had breached the unbreachable. Inside the vault, the real work began. They still had to contend with the heat sensors inside. The monster used the block of styrofoam to shield their body heat as they moved. They then covered the remaining sensors with heavy plastic bags, effectively neutralizing the entire system. Now they were free to work. Before them lay 189 safe deposit boxes, each a miniature safe holding a fortune. The team didn't have the time or ability to open all of them. They had to choose their targets. They used a specially designed, hand-cranked tool to pull the locks on the boxes. It was a slow, physically demanding process. They worked for hours in the silent, cold vault, methodically breaking into box after box. They emptied the contents into large duffel bags, loose diamonds, stacks of foreign currency, gold bars, priceless necklaces, watches, and bonds. They were selective, taking the most valuable and untraceable items. They left behind what they couldn't carry or what was too risky to transport. By the early hours of Sunday morning, they had filled their bags. Their haul was immense, far exceeding their initial expectations. Their exit was as flawless as their entry. They carefully cleaned the scene, wiping down surfaces to remove any potential fingerprints. They retrieved their tools, relocked the vault door, and reset the combination. They left the antechamber, relocking the grate behind them. They removed the fake tape from the security recorder. To any casual observer, it would appear as if nothing had happened. They walked out of the diamond center just before dawn, melting back into the quiet streets of Antwerp. They had achieved the impossible. They had committed the perfect crime. Leaving behind no clues, no witnesses, and no evidence, the vault was a sealed tomb, its secret violation known only to them. The drive away from Antwerp was a mixture of adrenaline, triumph, and exhaustion. The team split up. Notarbartolo and Speedy, the anxious getaway driver, were tasked with the final crucial step, destroying the evidence. Their car was filled with bags containing the tools, the plans, the hairspray cans, the videotape, gloves, and any other incriminating items from the heist. The plan was simple. Drive to a secluded location, burn everything to ash, and scatter the remains. It was a routine part of any professional operation, the final act of erasing their existence. But perfection is a fragile state, easily shattered by the unpredictability of human emotion. As they drove down the E19 motorway towards Brussels, Speedy began to unravel. The sheer scale of what they had accomplished, the immense risk they had taken, and the paranoia of being caught began to overwhelm him. He suffered a full-blown panic attack. He became agitated, convinced they were being followed, certain that every passing car was the police. Notarbartolo tried to calm him down, but Speedy was inconsolable. He refused to participate in the slow, careful process of burning the evidence. The argument escalated. In his panic, Speedy insisted they just dump everything and get away as quickly as possible. Notarbartolo, exhausted and wanting to avoid a scene, reluctantly agreed. It was a catastrophic decision, a moment of weakness that would unravel their masterpiece. They pulled off the highway near a small patch of woods in Vilvoorde, a suburb of Brussels. In the darkness, they hastily tossed the bags of evidence into the thick underbrush. They didn't bury them. They didn't burn them. They just dumped them, like common litter bugs, and sped off into the night. It was a sloppy, amateurish mistake, a stark contrast to the brilliant precision of the preceding hours. In that moment, the perfect crime ceased to be perfect. They had left a breadcrumb, a tiny loose thread that a patient investigator could pull to unravel the entire tapestry. Back in Antwerp on Monday morning, the discovery of the heist sent shockwaves through the global diamond industry. The scene inside the vault was mystifying for the investigators. Led by Chief Superintendent Patrick de Kock of the Antwerp Police's Diamond Squad, there were no signs of a break-in. The sophisticated alarm system had no record of being triggered. The security footage showed nothing unusual. The vault door itself was undamaged. The initial theory was that it had to be an inside job, likely involving someone from the security staff or the vault management. The police believed that was the only plausible explanation. The idea that an outside team could defeat such a complex, multi-layered security system without leaving a single trace seemed like something out of a Hollywood movie. It was simply not believable. Investigators began the painstaking process of interviewing every employee, security guard, and tenant of the Diamond Center, searching for a weak link, a disgruntled worker, or someone with a sudden, unexplained source of wealth. The investigation was going nowhere. They had no witnesses, no forensic evidence, and no suspects. The thieves had vanished without a trace, and the mystery of how they accomplished the impossible deepened with each passing day. The media dubbed it the heist of the century, and for a while it seemed destined to become one of the great unsolved crimes, a legendary feat of criminal engineering. The school of Turin had created a perfect vacuum. But miles away, in the damp woods of Vilvoorde, that vacuum was about to be filled. The fate of the case would turn not on a brilliant piece of detective work or a high-tech forensic breakthrough, but on a retired man with a strong sense of civic duty. The man owned the small patch of land where Notarbartolo and Speedy had dumped their trash. He was a fastidious property owner who disliked litter and made a habit of clearing any rubbish he found near his fence line. A few days after the heist, while on one of his regular patrols, he stumbled upon the scattered garbage bags. Annoyed by the illegal dumping, he gathered the bags with the intention of looking for any piece of mail or identification so he could report the culprit to the police. As he began to sift through the contents, he realized this was no ordinary trash. He found strange tools, disassembled electronics, empty videotape cassettes, and balaclavas, and then he found something that made him stop cold: envelopes bearing the logo of the Antwerp World Diamond Center. He immediately called the police. When the detectives from the Diamond Squad arrived, they couldn't believe their luck. It was the kind of break that investigators dream of. This pile of garbage, discarded in a panic, was a treasure trove of evidence, a complete toolkit for deconstructing the perfect crime. They carefully collected every scrap of paper, every piece of trash, and transported it back to their forensics lab. The contents of the bags were a revelation. They found the hairspray cans, confirming their theory about how the infrared sensors might have been blinded. They found remnants of the specialized tools used to breach the safe deposit boxes. But the most crucial discoveries were the small, seemingly insignificant pieces of personal detritus mixed in with the tools of the trade. They found receipts from a local electronics store. They found invoices for a company named Selgin, registered to an office in the Diamond Center, and, most damningly, they found a half-eaten salami sandwich. In the world of forensics, every contact leaves a trace. The sandwich was immediately sent for DNA analysis. The invoices and receipts led them directly to the tenant of the third-floor office, a visiting Italian diamond merchant named Leonardo Notarbartolo. Suddenly, the police had a name. They pulled his file and his tenant application photo. They checked his phone records, which showed a flurry of calls to a small group of Italian numbers in the days surrounding the heist. One by one, the ghosts were beginning to take shape. The DNA results came back from the lab. The sample from the partially eaten sandwich was a match to Leonardo Notarbartolo. It was the smoking gun. The connection was undeniable. This seemingly legitimate merchant, who had been inside the building for 2 years, was directly linked to the refuse from the heist. The inside job theory was correct, but not in the way they had imagined. The intruder hadn't come from the security team. He had been a customer, hiding in plain sight. The investigation kicked into high gear. Chief Superintendent DeCock and his team now had a face, a name, and a network to unravel. They traced the phone numbers Notarbartolo had been calling. One belonged to Pietro Tavano, a man with a minor criminal record, known to his friends as Speedy. Another belonged to Ferdinando Finotto, a man whose physical description matched that of a large, imposing figure, the monster. The web was growing. An international manhunt was launched. Notarbartolo, believing he had gotten away clean, had returned to his comfortable life in Turin. He had no idea that a discarded lunch had sealed his fate. The Antwerp police, working with their Italian counterparts, tracked his movements. They tailed him, monitored his calls, and gathered evidence. They discovered his history as a professional thief and his association with the other men. The pieces were all falling into place. Just 10 days after the heist, on February 27, 2003, as Notarbartolo was driving near his home in Turin, he was surrounded by police cars and arrested. He was reportedly calm, almost bemused. He couldn't understand how they had found him. In his mind, the plan had been flawless. The police also moved in on the other members of the crew. Speedy, the monster, and another associate were arrested. The genius and the mysterious King of Keys, however, managed to evade capture, and their true identities remain unconfirmed to this day. The trial of Leonardo Notarbartolo and his captured associates began in 2005 in Antwerp. It was a media sensation. The prosecution laid out its case with methodical precision, centered around the mountain of evidence recovered from the trash bags in Vilvoorde. They presented the DNA evidence from the sandwich, the phone records linking the conspirators, and the invoices tying Notarbartolo directly to the Diamond Center. They reconstructed the heist step by step, explaining to the court how the team had brilliantly defeated each of the 10 layers of security. Notarbartolo, however, had a story of his own, a counter-narrative so elaborate and audacious that it added another layer of myth to the already legendary crime. Taking the stand in his own defense, he admitted to his role in the heist. He did not deny being there, but he claimed that the entire operation was not what it seemed. He alleged that they had been hired by a prominent Jewish diamond merchant as part of a massive insurance fraud scheme. According to Notarbartolo's testimony, the merchant had approached him with a proposition. He and other dealers were struggling financially and had diamonds that were difficult to sell. They wanted to stage a robbery to collect the insurance money on their otherwise illiquid assets. Notarbartolo claimed the merchant gave him the key to the vault, the combination and inside information on how to disable the security systems. He insisted that the true value of the stolen goods was only around $20 million, not the more than $100 million being claimed. He argued that the vault had been mostly emptied by the dealers themselves before the heist, and that his team was there simply to create the appearance of a major robbery. This story was explosive. It suggested a deep-seated corruption within the famously secretive Antwerp diamond trade. Notarbartolo claimed that he and his team were essentially scapegoats, the hired hands in a much larger conspiracy. He said they were double-crossed by the merchant, who was supposed to pay them a share of the fraudulent insurance claim but never did. It was a compelling narrative, playing on the mystique and inherent mistrust surrounding the diamond industry. The prosecutors, however, dismissed his story as a desperate fiction, a fantastical tale concocted to minimize his sentence and sow confusion. They pointed out that Notarbartolo offered no concrete evidence to support his claims. He couldn't provide the name of the alleged merchant who hired him, claiming he feared for his family's safety. There were no bank records, no witnesses, and no paper trail to back up his version of events. The prosecution argued that the evidence found in the woods, the meticulous tools, the detailed plans, pointed not to a staged event but to a brilliantly executed, independent criminal enterprise. The court ultimately agreed with the prosecution. They found Notarbartolo's insurance fraud story to be unsubstantiated and self-serving. In 2005, he was found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. His accomplices, Ferdinando Finotto and Pietro Tavano, each received 5-year sentences for their roles. The verdict brought a legal conclusion to the case, but it did little to diminish its legend. The vast majority of the $100 million haul was never recovered, its whereabouts a secret that Notarbartolo and his team have taken with them. The diamonds, jewels, and gold simply vanished, absorbed back into the world's black markets, forever lost. Leonardo Notarbartolo was granted early release from prison in 2009 for good behavior. He returned to Italy, where he has since given interviews and even authored a book about his life, continuing to maintain his version of the insurance fraud story. He presents himself not as a common thief, but as a master of his craft who was pulled into a scheme far larger than himself. Whether this is the truth or simply the final, masterful performance of a master manipulator remains a point of debate. His narrative ensures that a shadow of doubt, a hint of conspiracy, will forever hang over the official account of the Antwerp diamond heist. So we return to our central theme, the anatomy of a perfect crime. What makes the Antwerp heist so enduringly fascinating is not just the scale of the theft or the ingenuity of its execution, but its profound lesson on the nature of perfection itself. For over 2 years, Leonardo Notarbartolo and his team orchestrated a plan of almost inhuman precision. They studied, they practiced, and they anticipated every conceivable technological and physical barrier. They defeated a $100 million security system with hairspray, a block of styrofoam, and an aluminum shield. It was a victory of intellect and patience over brute force and technology. They understood that the most complex systems often have the simplest vulnerabilities, rooted not in faulty code or weak steel, but in the predictable patterns of human behavior. The guards' routines, the complacency of leaving the key in an unlocked closet, the assumption that no one would be patient enough to spend years hiding in plain sight, these were the flaws they exploited. The heist itself, from the moment they entered the building to the moment they walked out with the loot, was flawless. It was a masterclass in criminal engineering that will be studied for generations. Yet the entire enterprise was brought down not by a failure of the plan, but by a failure of the human element within it. The plan did not account for panic. It did not have a contingency for a man's nerve breaking at the final crucial moment. The downfall of the school of Turin came down to Speedy's anxiety attack on a dark highway. It was a moment of pure, uncontrollable human emotion. That single burst of fear led to the sloppy disposal of the evidence, which led to the discovery by the landowner, which led to the sandwich, the DNA, and the unraveling of the entire network. The very thing that made the crime so brilliant, its meticulous, obsessive attention to technical detail, was also its blind spot. The thieves were masters of systems, but they were not masters of psychology. They could predict the behavior of a motion sensor, but not the behavior of a terrified accomplice. The anatomy of this perfect crime reveals a fundamental truth. No system designed and operated by humans can ever be truly flawless, because humanity itself is the ultimate, unpredictable variable. The school of Turin taught the world that any lock can be picked and any fortress breached, but they also left behind a more enduring lesson, that the most intricate plans, devised over years and executed in silence, can be utterly destroyed by the weight of a single half-eaten sandwich. This has been Anatomy of Crime, where the truth is never simple, but always worth seeking.